Hi, and welcome to another episode of She Leads Biotech, the podcast where we celebrate the achievements of women in the life sciences. Today's guest has spent her career focused on improving women's health and bringing better solutions to conditions that have historically been overlooked or simply accepted as part of aging. She began her career in medicine following a path that almost felt destined. Raised in a medical family with an obstetrician gynecologist father and a midwife mother. She was immersed in the world of women's health from an early age. Over time, her interests evolved toward pelvic reconstructive surgery, where she combined her love of surgery with caring for women later in life who often faced conditions that had long been under-discussed and undertreated. After more than a decade in academic medicine, she began to think about how technology could expand the impact of the work she was doing. Treating patients one at a time was meaningful, but developing innovative tools and therapies could reach thousands more women and fundamentally change how pelvic health conditions are treated. That thinking ultimately led her into the world of medical technology, where she's played a key role in developing solutions designed to improve outcomes for women dealing with pelvic floor disorders and urinary incontinence. Today, she leads a company dedicated to advancing women's pelvic health while continuing to bring her clinical expertise to the forefront of innovation. So please welcome CEO and Chief Medical Officer of Axena Health, Dr. Mandy Pulliam. Mandy, good afternoon.
Hello.
Lovely to have you join us. Thank you so much. Where am I speaking to you from?
I am in upstate New York, in a town where there are more cows than people, Sherburne, New York.
So, as I say, appreciate you joining us. One of the ways that I always want to start the show, one of the things that really intrigues me is why medicine? What first drew you to medicine, in particular, specifically to pelvic reconstruction surgery, or did that come later? What was your
Right.
driving force?
So I think anything that you pursue in medicine is sort of an evolution. I grew up in a medical family. My father was an obstetrician gynecologist. My mother was a midwife. They actually met on labor and delivery. So in some ways, I came by my choice of OBGYN, quite honestly. As I got deeper into that process and deeper into the training, I learned two things about myself. One is that I am neither a good person nor a good doctor at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's when babies tend to come. And the other is that I really enjoyed both surgery, which is a lot of pelvic reconstruction, and also the patient population that tends to represent, which is women who've completed childbearing and maybe even a little older than that, in their 50s and 60s and 70s and sometimes 80s and 90s as well. I enjoyed those women. So I think both of those things really led me to choose pelvic reconstructive surgery.
Did you explore other things before, or did you just kind of know that that's where
Yeah.
to go?
Um, I think I always knew that obstetrics and gynecology was where I was destined to be. I did explore other things. In fact, I did a year of a pathology residency before I went on into OBGYN. I was interested in the science, but I found out that I talked too much to be a pathologist.
And when did you first begin thinking about how medical technology could change the outcome in women's health?
So I guess I'll give credit to two people. One is my father, one of my heroes, and if I reference him, infrequently here, I'll be surprised. He's someone I often quote, but he was always interested in new technology, incorporating new things into his practice, and really was sort of a cutting edge kind of guy. And so I was continually exposed to new things because of him, and listened to him talk about the new things he did in his practice. I mean, for an example, in the 1980s, he wrote a computer program for electronic medical records work and Medicare billing, and he was ahead of his time.
I was going to say in the 80s.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. The state of West Virginia really had something to deal with when he tried to bill Medicare and Medicaid using that, but it's been a long time. So there was my dad. And then in my fellowship, when I pursued pelvic reconstructive surgery, I was fortunate to be trained by Peter Rosenblatt, who is both a fantastic surgeon, but also quite a inventor. He had a notebook that he kept in which he wrote down all of his ideas and really then worked to develop many of them. And so I was inspired by him, and a lot of my memories of my training are either in the operating room or in the cafeteria in between surgical cases talking about ideas and things we could do to make things better or easier or more effective.
So you spent, 12 years? Was it about 12 years in academia medicine
Yes.
practicing before kind of going into biotech and
Hmm.
medical devices? What was it that prompted that? Was it, we couldn't have just been the 3 o'clock in the morning, don't want to deliver babies at that time.
No.
What prompted the thought, I'm going to move into industry?
Hmm. So I loved my work in academic medicine. I enjoyed teaching and some of the research and a lot of the clinical care. I think I've always been a person with big ideas and really wanted to make a big impact. And I realized that though I enjoyed seeing patients and interacting with them one by one, that the opportunity to develop something, a technology, a device, would give the opportunity to reach many more women and care for more of them than I could do in the one by one kind of way of academics or just clinical medicine generally.
Right. And what surprised you the most when you made that transition?
I think there were a couple of things that surprised me. One is actually how few people with medical backgrounds are involved in medical technology and medical device and in industry. And actually, I mean, to this day, I think that's a shame. I think people with clinical experience who understand patient care really have a lot to offer for industry and for the successful development of tools, devices, things that can help treat women and other patients.
I mean, I've noticed through doing the podcast, actually,
Right.
I've had a couple of guests on that have gone off to be founders of
Hmm.
companies that have developed something that they struggled with in their life as a surgeon and thought there must be an easier way to do
Right.
this, and actually invented something and then went on into leadership through
Hmm.
that purely by becoming the founder of the companies. In your experience, is that where people would tend to go
You mean from
from
industry
the kind
from
of surgical side of it
yeah.
and then going into industry, either just going in from a leadership perspective or that they would be a founder of something
Hmm.
because they've had an idea and thought, I need to see this through to the end
Yeah.
because it's going to change the world?
I think that's right. I think, I mean, there's nothing like being in a surgical situation to understand the limitations of the equipment that you have.
Yep.
And, as I'm sure surgery is not there's nothing cookie cutter about it. It's not like putting together IKEA furniture or something where you do the same thing the same way every time. I mean, you ought
Yep.
to, but human anatomy is not that way. It's much more varied.
Yep.
And so as you get into whatever surgery you're doing with the tools that you have available, there's a certain sort of, I'll call it a MacGyver approach that has to happen because not all anatomies are easily, kind of adjust themselves to the tools that you have. And so you're constantly thinking, how can I make this work? And that's really a perfect sort of scenario for coming up with new ideas or at least incremental change on old ideas. So I think it's
Okay.
a logical place to start if you're an inventor or if you are someone who does, I mean, perhaps a reconstructive surgery is even better, right? How do we fix pelvic floor disorders? And the surgeries that we have are imperfect. So there's really a lot of opportunity to improve upon it and to develop new things.
So that brings me on to Axena Health then.
Hmm.
Talk to me about the work that they do, and what the impact is going to be
Right.
for what's going on there.
Sure. So Axena Health is a women's health company that's committed to women's pelvic health. Our first and primary product at this point is called the Leva Pelvic Health System. It's a motion-based biofeedback device that's designed to educate women about how to properly train the pelvic floor muscles. Those muscles are responsible for things like urinary continence, fecal continence. They hold the contents of your pelvis in and up. They're very busy muscles in women. They, in addition to creating continence, are muscles that are involved in orgasm. They're muscles that are stretched and potentially damaged in childbirth. They work when you breathe. You use them to stand up from sitting. So they're really critical muscles, and we train them. And that helps address many types of urinary incontinence and fecal incontinence.
How do you train them?
How do you train them? So historically, I think the word that we've used to describe that sort of muscle therapy is a Kegel exercise. The challenge is the pelvic floor, you can't see it. If as we're sitting here, you put your hands on your hips, The muscles in the pelvis are a basket inside the bony part of your pelvis that hold everything in so they don't fall out the bottom, right?
Right.
But they also control the opening for the bladder and the opening for the bowel. And so it's the tension on those muscles, the strength of those muscles actually continue to keep things inside, like urine, and also let them out.
I mean, I have to say, I've been pretty good with my pelvic floor exercises. After my
Mm-hmm.
43-hour labour with my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
I remember that the midwives visiting afterwards saying, don't forget to do your pelvic floor
That's right.
exercises and make sure
Yeah.
you do. And you can do them standing in the shopping line and in the
Mm-hmm.
supermarket. And, there's nothing special that you have to do. You don't need any special equipment. You can just do it. But that's changed over years, hasn't
Right.
that? Because there's only a
Right.
certain extent of a point
Yeah.
that you can do that.
Well, right. And let me challenge you that with that for a minute. If you do a pelvic floor muscle squeeze right now,
Yes,
how
I'm
do you know
doing it
you're
right
doing
now.
it? How do you know you're doing it? Can you see those muscles? How would you know? It's not like a biceps lift in the gym where you can watch yourself in the mirror, you can see your muscle moving.
Right.
So there's a certain kind of challenge to pelvic floor muscle training, to strengthening those muscles, because you can't see those muscles. And in fact, clinically, when I see patients, you often examine a woman like a pelvic exam, and you ask her to do a muscle squeeze and lift there. She thinks she's doing it properly, but she's not. Instead,
Oh,
in
wow.
fact, commonly women bear down when they think they're squeezing and pulling up and in. So it's very helpful to have some feedback or something that allows you to visualize what is happening with those muscles as you're doing the training, so you can ensure you're doing it properly. But the big motivator for me and being interested in this product, and there are lots of different types of biofeedback. I happen to think that the motion-based biofeedback is more meaningful to people, because movement is actually kind of how we understand how muscles work. Um, but we collect information using an app. The biofeedback device, which gets placed in the vagina, is connected to an app, and we collect information. How does your pelvic floor move? How high can you lift those muscles when you squeeze them? How often do you do your training? How does the ability of the muscles to move improve or change over time? And then how does that impact your symptoms? So we're looking at all of that together, and that really allows us to learn a whole lot about how the pelvic floor muscles change and the function of them improves over time with exercise. And we're beginning to use machine learning, which is basically fancy statistics, and ultimately artificial intelligence to help us understand how to best train those muscles, how an individual woman is likely to have success or not with pelvic floor muscle training. What are the attributes of her anatomy and her physiology that would allow us to understand if she can have success? So
I
that's
was
where
going
we're
to ask.
going.
I
Yeah.
was going to ask you about that as to the
Yeah.
AI element,
Yeah.
how you see that going, because that's coming into a lot of areas. It's
Hmm.
creeping into everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you how that
Yeah.
impacts the work you're doing, but you've
Right.
answered that
Right.
for me. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess the answer there for sure is that we're gathering the information, and we want to use it responsibly and carefully so that we provide better outcomes for women. I mean, that's really the motivation behind using that information, and we're learning how to do that now. But right now, what we offer is a 12-week program with a coach to help a woman learn to do pelvic floor muscle training, understanding that we've done the research that would prove that pelvic floor muscle training with our Leva device actually results in better outcomes for continence, both fecal incontinence or for urinary incontinence. That's superior to the usual care that women experience when they go home and do pelvic floor muscle training on their own.
Right. And so what would you asked me a question, how do I know if it's working?
Hmm.
How would you know if
Right.
how do you if you're not doing it because of symptoms of something, how would you know that you
Hmm.
have that stronger pelvic floor?
Right. So that's a great question, and I actually think that the answer is a little bit complicated, but it kind of goes in the sense of, think about your spine.
Yep.
Right. We don't exercise our spines. Those muscles are part of what's called the postural muscles. So when you're sitting up in your chair, you're actually using those muscles. So you don't need to go to the gym so you can be sure to sit up straight, right? We're all sitting up a little straighter now because I've started this conversation. But
I was thinking back to my school days when the
yeah.
headmistress used to come around and she would always
Right.
say, Cox, deportment. And I'd be like, oh, okay.
Okay. Right.
Trained to sit up
Yeah.
straight.
Yeah. So the point there is if you use those muscles properly as part of your daily life, you're going to have good posture, right? If you slump all the time, your
Yep.
muscles aren't being trained properly. So once you learn what to do and sitting up straight, then you're able to use those muscles routinely. So for continence and for other impacts of pelvic floor muscles, learning how to use them using a device like Leva, but using those pelvic floor muscles properly will result in improved symptoms. And that will continue because the muscles in your pelvis are a lot more like your spine. You use them every day.
Right.
Again, every time you breathe, stand up from sitting, cough or sneeze, jump or run, all of those things.
So is that where, again, going back to my midwife telling me, you would way to check is to stop midstream urinating and stop midstream, and that would, or is that some old wives' tale that's been going on for donkey's years?
Well, it is true that squeezing those muscles off to stop the flow of urine, it's not something I recommend because you want to, the idea with urination is those muscles relax to let urine out,
Right.
and they contract to stop the flow of urine. But you don't want to stop the flow of urine while you're urinating because that's a little bit counterintuitive and not exactly a great practice, but it is a way to
Right.
understand if you're using those muscles properly.
Okay.
Once you've started the urination process, it's not necessarily true that being unable to completely stop that flow represents poorly functioning pelvic floor muscles.
Right. Okay. So we'll put that down to old wives' tale and tick that
Yeah,
box.
it's a little bit of an old wives' tale. It is true; that is what those muscles do. When I'm training women to understand their pelvic floor muscles and use them, the thought cue I use is about passing gas. Pretend you have to pass gas and you don't want to; it would be embarrassing. Those are the muscles that you need to squeeze.
Okay. All right. Oh, there's something I've learned there.
There we go.
Thank you. Now, what I do want to cover, you've recently transitioned into the CEO role at Axena. You're maintaining your role as Chief Medical Officer. What's that transition been like?
So I liken it to what it was like actually when I left academics and moved into industry in the first place as the chief medical officer. You
Right.
know, anytime you have a new role, there is so much to learn. And I've sat outside the CEO role. I mean, I've been alongside in the C-suite with whoever the person was in the company for a long time, watching what they've done, understanding the decisions they've made, and observing and thinking, I could probably do that. When you get into the role, you learn about all the things that you need to do and the learning that goes along with it. And on both occasions, I think the thing I've learned the most that is the most important is really the idea that it's the people around you that make the team. And there's not a single person that can do the things that are required to make a company successful on their own. So I'm learning about the needs and the relationships with the people around me, and it's a different thing. You know, before I was running clinical trials and designing research. Now I'm helping to make key decisions about the future of the company, but I can't do it alone. I say helping because I may be the person who decides, but I need the commercial input from the experts in that arena, from the experts in marketing and finance to bring all of that together to make the best decisions for the company.
Right. And how does being a physician shape the way that you lead an organization? Does it make any difference?
So a lot of medical training is about collaboration, believe it or not. When you work with a patient to help make a treatment decision, you need to understand them, where they're coming from, the needs that they have, and then you have to work with a team to take care of them. So it's not so much that as a clinician or a doctor, I would say, we're going to do this. I might make that ultimate decision, but it's not usually me that makes it happen. You know, there's a team of very capable, independently knowledgeable men and women who bring those things into action, whether you're talking about the nursing team or the front desk staff that interact with patients. So running that team, there's a little bit of CEO-ness in that kind of work because you have to make sure that you're attending to the team in order to care for the patient.
Right. And it's having that kind of umbrella view, isn't it?
Right.
Being
That's
able to
right.
kind of see the whole picture rather than just this is my bit.
Yeah.
It's looking at the whole thing.
I will say when I came over to industry, I can only look back and characterize myself as arrogant. You know, I'm the doctor. I can do this. I can take care of anything. And I had an opinion about how everything ought to be done. It took me a long time to understand the true expertise of the people around me, whether those were, you know, people in sales or marketing or finance. I think I had a humbling over the over the years that I've done this to really understand the value of a well-qualified team and all of those areas of expertise.
And why do you think that is? Is that, I mean, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to anybody in the medical profession, but there is a thing about physicians, surgeons having that arrogance that it's almost built in. Is that a true statement? And is it just something that's inherent and then needs to be learned or unlearned, I guess, as a skill when you're moving into another part of the company?
Yeah. So I think it is something that's learned to an extent, but to an extent, I would argue that it's necessary in certain circumstances. I mean, for
Yeah,
example, if you need surgery, you really don't want to go to a surgeon who says, well, I kind of think I might be able to do it. I mean, that's not exactly confidence inspiring. And to inspire
yep,
confidence, you need to be confident.
yep,
And that involves honing your skills, believing in them, and recognizing that in the surgical world, if you are the surgeon, there are lots of people around you, but you're the person that is responsible ultimately. And it's a big responsibility.
right,
So I think there is some sense in which that arrogance is it's what you become a little bit as you move into those things. But the best surgeries, the best operating rooms, the best outcomes, I think, are with teams where everyone is recognized for the independent and valuable contribution they make.
right, okay. And I guess that you need to, as you say, this whole point of the patient, because it's patient first, and that the patient going under anesthetic and ready to have an operation has got to believe that person's got the best
That's
outcome in
right.
mind. So I can really see where that needs to come from. So how do you balance? Because you've still got this medical, that's your skill, and now as a CEO, very much more the strategic
Right.
element of the business. How do you balance that? How do you balance the clinical integrity with business strategy?
I'll say I don't know that I see it as a balance.
Okay.
I think that the foundation of any medical device business needs to be the efficacy of the product and the proof of it in a way.
Yep.
And I think here at Axena, we've done that. We have taken the Leva product and I think we now have 14 peer-reviewed articles establishing the efficacy of the product. So with that kind of a foundation, I think the strategy becomes a lot more free, right?
Yep.
We're not covering anything up. We're actually
Yep.
putting out there something that we know works, and the strategy is really just around how to get that out there, how to do the right thing with the product, which is to get it into the hands of the women who
Get
need
into
it.
heads. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so to me, I don't think it's conflicting as well as just the basis for allowing great strategy opportunities.
Okay. All right. And one of the things that I when I was doing a little bit of research on you, your profile talks about leading teams through challenging decisions and crisis situations. I can imagine certainly as a physician that those crisis situations. But what does that look like in practice within business?
So I'll tell you one thing that I've actually been reflecting on this recently. And I'll give the surgical example first, and then I'll go to business. In surgery, if something goes wrong and you need to figure out how to fix it, the first thing you can't do is say, okay, everybody, everything's going to be okay, right? The immediate imperative is to figure out what to do and then to understand who's in the room and how you can solve the problem together, right? Very rarely, if something goes wrong in surgery, if there's catastrophic bleeding or something else, do you actually have the surgeon working alone solely to fix the problem? You need blood, you need anesthesia, you need assistance to help you see. All of those things have to come together, and if you're the surgeon, you have to direct those things, right? So if you bring that over to a business scenario, and the one I'm thinking of as we talk is that back when we were developing our randomized controlled trial for Leva, COVID happened. And
Oh
suddenly,
yeah,
right, suddenly
that
there
one.
was, randomized controlled trials for things that weren't cancer, transparently, were not happening because who would go to a hospital to do that? But our product is designed to be used at home. And so the question was, could we develop a trial that could be accomplished during COVID? I mean, we couldn't just sit and wait
Mm,
and hope we would survive with enough money in our little startup to carry us through the other side. And so the way to do that is to begin to think through who are the stakeholders in the conversation and how do you involve them in the process, right? So I had academic collaborators and I asked them, what do you think about this? And they ran off into the literature and found the things that we needed to know about if it had ever been done, a decentralized trial, and how it could be done. I talked to our CEO and our commercial team. What do we need to do? What would be the repercussions and the pros and cons of doing a trial in this way? And built consensus. This was an emergency, but not in the same way that someone bleeding was an emergency. We didn't need to do something right now, but
Yeah.
we did need to say to each other, we need to figure out what to do. We can't just decide things are going to be okay, but everybody needed to be involved in the conversation. So I think that once there is a thorny problem, figuring out the consensus around it is really important.
Right.
Because I think there are so many stakeholders in any business decision, and they really all need to be as aligned as possible before you can go forward.
Okay. And believe it or not, there were some upsides with COVID within the healthcare system of much more at-home diagnostics and all of those that started to develop.
Yeah.
Was there an upside to doing the trials for women at home? In hindsight, did it speed things through more than it would have done, or would it not have made any difference?
It absolutely sped things through. I mean, we accrued the trial in about 6 months, and in a brick and mortar situation where we had patients coming into research centers and signing up in that way, it probably would have taken us a year and a half or two.
Right.
So, I mean, there was a tremendous benefit in that way. And it was unexpected. I don't think we imagined that when we opened up the marketing tools that we use to recruit people on Instagram and Facebook and so forth, that we would have thousands of responses within days. I mean, we were so overwhelmed when we started. It was great fun.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Looking at the further development in women's what conversations around pelvic health are not happening that still need to happen?
So actually, I was just on a call today where one of the gentlemen that I was talking with said, when I grew up in my very conservative family, even saying the word pelvis out loud was a forbidden word. I thought that was, kind of interesting. But I do think that talking about pelvic health is still very challenging for many people. And I think that's true for a couple of reasons. One is that the problems associated with it, like urinary or fecal incontinence, are embarrassing. They're very private problems. And so while we love to have women who say, I have this problem and I treated it successfully, saying, I have this problem is really challenging.
Right.
And so bringing that out into the light where there's no stigma associated with talking about these things is a really sort of critically important piece in terms of bringing pelvic health into the forefront. And a lot of it is women, I think, are conditioned to believe that a lot of these problems are things that are just a result of aging. They might be the price that you pay for childbirth, those sorts of things. And so they don't say anything and they suffer in silence until they go to the, incontinence aisle on the, in the drugstore, and they sneak out with their incontinence pads. And generally they cope. Instead of truly trying to take it head on. And that's something I think we could all stand to talk more about.
Yeah. And so there's no age limit per se to being able to reverse something regarding pelvic floor. It's a bit like I was one of the guests I had, we were talking about HRT, and I had always believed that you get to a certain point. So when I moved from the UK to the US, I had to wean myself off of the HRT that I was on because I couldn't get back, and then they didn't really promote doing it here in the US. And so I got to 60, I think, and just said, well, that's it, And then I had a guest on who said, no, it's not. You can still. So, I think that's a wonderful message to get out for women who are, in their 60s, and you notice when you're out, you can't laugh quite as hard, and you try and cross your legs when you're laughing, and things still happen. Yeah. And you do think, oh well, that's it now, really. But what you're saying is through products like yours, they can be retrained to be firmer.
Absolutely.
That's
and
incredible.
If you think about every once in a while, you see one of these in a magazine, about a woman who at 75 ran her first marathon.
Yes.
I mean, those are extreme examples, but they actually reflect a truth about the science of muscle training, which is that you can strengthen those muscles at every age. You might do it faster when you're 20 than you do it when you're 60, but it's not impossible, and it does have a positive impact. And so the thinking that it's too far gone, or I should have done this years ago, there's always something that you can do. And pelvic floor muscle training is never the wrong first step for anyone at any age.
Okay. And for using your product, is it something that people can buy to do at home? Is it that it's within a hospital or clinic setup? How does it work?
So it's a prescription product. So that means that you need a clinician, and a physician, a nurse practitioner, someone to assess you and diagnose you with urinary incontinence and then prescribe it for you. We are committed to insurance coverage, and we've made progress. We have over 50 million covered lives right now, meaning that many people have access to Leva through their insurance plans. And we'll continue to pursue that, in part because urinary incontinence is a medical problem, and women deserve treatments that have been shown to work, and they deserve treatments that are covered by insurance for medical problems. So that's where we are working hard to make sure that we do the things that can get Leva into the hands of women. We have HSA and FSA coverage for those savings accounts that allow you to reimburse medical expenses. So there's opportunity through your clinician, and there are also telehealth options that would allow you to with a prescribing clinician if you're waiting a long time to get to your own.
Excellent. Oh, well, that's amazing. I've learned so much in the time we've spent together. Thank you so much, Mandy, for sharing that with me. My parting question to you is what advice would you give physicians who are considering moving into industry?
A couple of things I'd say. One is, I think industry needs you. The experience that you have, the knowledge you have about how the system works, about what patients need, about what clinicians need is invaluable. So lean in and go for it. And the other is, you need other expertise. So be sure to surround yourself with people in finance and marketing and sales. A good idea does not a great product to make. You need all sorts of areas of expertise and development in order to get a good idea into the hands of people who need it.
Okay. And we started this conversation with you mentioning your dad and saying, you know, if I don't mention him lots of times, and actually you haven't.
I haven't.
You haven't. So I just want to part with what was the best piece of advice that you think that your dad ever gave you?
Well, I think it must have been when I went to medical school. And he said to me, Mandy, if they ask you if you want to do the appendectomy, grab the knife, meaning seize the opportunities that are before you.
Right.
And I think that's a message that has followed me in my life. And I think leaning in and taking the opportunities before you and pursuing the ideas and the dreams that you have is really important. You can't do that if you're not willing to just give it a shot.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to cut this bit because I just want to ask you how to properly pronounce the name of the company.
Axena.
Axena. Okay, because I've been using the X, and I thought that doesn't sound right.
It doesn't. It does.
Okay, so I'll go back to Mandy. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's really been a pleasure, and I wish you every success at Axena.
Thank you.
And the work that you're doing there is incredible. And I look forward to seeing many women deal with the incontinence problems as a result of Leva and the work that you guys do.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to end now. Just don't leave yet. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me for this episode of She Leads Biotech. If today's story inspired you, subscribe, follow, and comment. Because when one woman's voice is heard, many more find theirs. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep leading.